Neptune was the Roman god of the sea, the divine ruler of the vast, boundless watery realm that has conveyed men to inspired voyages of discovery, as well as lured them to expire in its stormy depths. This was the name given to the new planet discovered in 1846, glowing faintly amongst the stars of the tropical zodiac sign Aquarius. Moving 30 times further from the Sun than Earth, and only visible with a telescope, Neptune's orbit is of such length that it is only now, in the years 2009 and 2010, completing its first orbital revolution since it was discovered. Neptune is itself orbited by many moons, bearing names of some classical maritime deities: Proteus the shapeshifter, Triton the merman messenger of the deep, and Nereid the sea nymph children of Neptune. Neptune was the Roman equivalent of the Greek god Poseidon, and his trident forms a symbol or glyph that is widely used to represent the planet. Consisting of a cross surmounted by a crescent, the glyph symbolizes the soul, arising from and transcending the material world. Almost like a premonition of what was to come some 230 years in the future, Neptune was actually first sighted by the Tuscan astronomer Galileo in 1612, when he was making observations of Jupiter with his telescope. But being stationary in the sky as viewed from Earth, he mistook it for a fixed star. In the decades following the discovery of the new planet, Uranus, which was first sighted in 1781 by William Herschel, mathematicians and astronomers recognized that the motion of Uranus was being perturbed by something else, something as yet unseen, most likely an eighth planet. Frenchman Jean Leverrier calculated the position of this putative body and sent his calculations to German astronomer Johann Gottfried Galle, who was working at the Berlin Observatory. With the help of his assistant, Galle pointed his telescope at Leverrier's estimated position and spotted the dim and distant planet not far from Saturn, with which it was in conjunction at that time. Observations of the correlations between the cycles of the heavenly bodies and events in the world date back 4,000 years to the civilizations of Mesopotamia. Rather than the examination of an individual's horoscope, mundane astrology examines changes in politics, the arts and culture, and how the major turning points in history are reflected in planetary cycles. We can gain further understanding of the symbolic meaning of Neptune by reflecting on the nature of historic events occurring at the time of its discovery. We were already given a clue to its meaning because it was discovered in conjunction with Saturn. Saturn has for millennia symbolized limits, the sorrows of life's hardships, and the finitude of reality. Around the time of Neptune's discovery, conjunct Saturn, there seemed to be a widespread yearning to transcend such hard restrictions of earthly existence, as well as a serious desire to carefully study and define the seemingly mysterious and chaotic ramifications of natural processes. Starting with the systematic use of ether in the 1840s, general anesthetics enabled the boundaries of physical pain to be transcended in order to allow surgical procedures to be performed. Photography, the capture of image in tangible form, developed in earnest at the same time. Art developed softer, more blurred, and less definite representations of the world. Marx published the Communist Manifesto in 1848, which concerned the notion of collective sharing of the burdens of labour as well as its rewards, and which set the foundations of a dissolution of previously inviolable distinctions of class. Darwin's 1859 work on the origin of species made a careful and detailed examination of the variegated efflorescence of the natural world and distilled from its myriad of forms a simple, consistent theory. Central to this theory was the notion that a flexible, adaptive response to changes in ambient conditions is what keeps life evolving. (1859) was also the year in which the first salt-bored commercial oil well started production. Not only did this usher in the modern era of cheap, abundant energy, with all the consequences that this had on human population and technological development, it also started the development of industrial and organic chemistry. All of the modern plastics that we use, for practically every aspect of our daily lives, derive from the organic chemical industry, and at its base, oil. Most of the drugs used in modern orthodox medicine developed from the same source, and the pharmaceutical industry, which manufactures these chemicals, has become dominant in the discourse of healthcare as a result.
The Saturn-Neptune cycle is an interesting one because Neptune was actually discovered, officially anyway, when it was in conjunction with Saturn on September 23, 1846. And Saturn's all about control, and Saturn's the planet really that identifies, at least in the Gokkulin studies, with scientists and researchers. Well, that's pretty appropriate then, that it would be the only planet discovered, or the first planet discovered, through mathematical means. When you look at Saturn, though, as a form of, say, state control, and you mix it with Neptune, which has a social idealism about it, you get workers' parties. So it wasn't long after this discovery of Neptune that the Communist Manifesto became the new wave of thought that swept European politics. And eventually, this did manifest in the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Of course, before that, we had labor parties and workers' parties throughout representation in Western government. But the 1917 revolution fell upon a conjunction, and the successive conjunctions after that marked important turning points in the cycle. For example, the next conjunction in the early 50s was really the split between East and West in the Cold War at its fullest, and the division, for example, of Korea, or the Korean War that was fought after that, pitting America against Russia. It was also the death of Stalin. And the next conjunction in 1989, well, we had the rise of Mikhail Gorbachev, and actually the fall of the Soviet Union and also the Eastern Bloc countries. So these Saturn-Neptune conjunctions mark pivotal turning points in the development of politics, particularly in Russia, and connected with the communist movement.
Taking a step back and looking at history over the longer term, Neptune's relationship with the dwarf planet Pluto, discovered in 1930 at the dawn of the nuclear age, may describe something about the power mythos of the age, the prevailing forces of collective will and the larger cultural and political shifts which act as the backdrop to entire historical eras.
Now, the Neptune-Pluto cycle works over 492 years, which is a hell of a long while. So what we're really looking at here is a cycle of dynasties, and that's what it has been. I mean, if we look at the Neptune-Pluto cycle conjunction, going back to 2560 BC, what happens is we get the building of the Great Pyramid of Cheops, which is still around today. But we could look at the conjunction point of, say, the middle of the 6th century BC, around 570, 576 BC. And what we see there, of course, is the first Persian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, which covered the whole of the Middle East. And at the opposition point of that Neptune-Pluto cycle, we had Alexander the Great coming and taking over the Middle East for himself. You know, the cycle sometimes fits remarkably with countries. Korea is one. We can look at the Goryeo Kingdom, which went for about 500 years, from the 900 conjunction through to the 1390s, I think it was. And then overtaking them was the Joseon dynasty, and they went from the late 1390s and through to the 1890s. So 1897, I think they finished up. So that was a remarkable dovetail with the Neptune-Pluto cycle. And of course, the Medicis, who really bankrolled the Renaissance, They actually started their bank in 1397, right around the conjunction point. So Neptune, Pluto look at dynasties. And for the last one, I mean, really the 1890s is the peak of the British Empire. And what they're doing here is handing over to the new superpower, which is going to be the US. And the US rose up on certain elements, one which was the motor car. And this is typical Neptune, Pluto, when you think of Neptune being the gasoline and Pluto being the mass production of the motor vehicle. We might also look at the motion picture industry, Edison's kinetoscope. That was patented around 1893, sometime in 1893, and that enabled the US to move their culture right throughout the world in a very, very Neptunian manner.
Neptune's movements and relationships with other planets seem to correspond to our conceptions of the ineffable, the mysterious and magical, and to phenomena which seem to shift seamlessly from one form to another, like Proteus, the shape-shifting sea creature of antiquity. Perhaps it is in the creative fashions of the times that such morphing of structure is most easily appreciated. When Neptune was in Leo, the playful costumes of the flapper years centered attention on the projection of personality and individual flair. In Virgo, fashion took a more restrained, cooler appearance, as values of utility and practicality added a uniformity to appearances. In Libra, gender roles became more pronounced, with long, wide dresses, narrow waists and emphasised busts in vogue. In Scorpio, miniskirts and skimpier costumes brought a more overt and bold sexual tone to outward appearances. In Sagittarius, fashion was noted for its extremes of largesse, as well as bright, vivid colours. In Capricorn, there was a fashion for power dressing, with emphasised shoulder pads and a sober taste for clean and tidy lines. From the late 1990s, with Neptune in Aquarius, fashion became more cool and casual, as social networking wired us to technology and the internet. In 2011, Neptune moves into Pisces, when fashion will reflect the wild and mysterious, but also the mystical and spiritual sides of Neptune, as the world around us reshapes itself. It is such complex, chaotic systems as the whims of fashion, the extemporizations of musical compositions, the development of storms, and the evolution of species that are represented by Neptune. Systems whose complexity is beyond our capacity to calculate, but which call for our soul to recognize and resonate with. The attempt to render such intricate visions of higher orders of complexity into forms perceptible to the human senses has been the preoccupation of artists and musicians since ancient times.